She was handcuffed in front of her entire office right there in the same place she had worked for 5 years without a single day off. She'd been framed, accused of laundering money. A guy from marketing whispered loud enough for all to hear, so the little spreadsheet mouse finally slipped. A female coworker smirked all that fake sweetness, and she's the ringleader. No one knew that the woman they mocked would escape from prison and return to send them all behind bars. Her name was Emily Walker, 29 years old, and she stood frozen as the FBI agent snapped the cuffs on her wrists. Her pale button-up shirt was tucked neatly into old slacks. Her hair pulled back in a plain ponytail. She didn't cry or protest. She just stood there, her eyes fixed on the floor while the office buzzed with cruel whispers. The hum of computers and the clink of coffee mugs faded as everyone turned to watch Emily's desk. Always tidy, with just a single photo of her elderly mother, was now surrounded by agents rifling through her drawers. Her co-workers didn't look sorry. They looked satisfied, like they'd been waiting for her to fall. She'd always been too quiet, too focused, too invisible. And now they thought they knew why. The office had never been kind to Emily. She was the accountant who showed up early, stayed late, and never missed a deadline. But to them, she was a nobody, a woman in marketing. Jessica, with sleek blonde hair and a designer scarf, used to lean over cubicles and say she's better suited for filing papers or mopping the basement. Her laugh was sharp, and it always got a chuckle from the others. Another guy, Tom, a sales rep with a loud voice and a flashy watch, would chime in. "That outfit? She's probably never even left the city." Emily heard it all. She'd just keep working her fingers moving over her keyboard, her face blank. But sometimes when no one was looking, she'd pause her hands hovering and take a slow breath before diving back in. Jessica was the worst. She'd smile to Emily's face, offer her coffee, ask about her weekend, but behind her back she'd sabotage her. A missing file here, a wrong number. There, always small enough to look like Emily's mistake. Once she gave Emily a stack of reports to fix by morning reports Jessica had deliberately messed up. Emily stayed until 2, her eyes burning, but she got it done. The next day, Jessica took credit, batting her lashes at their boss, Mr. Hargrove. Emily didn't say a word. She just went back to her desk, her shoulders straight, and started the next task. Nobody noticed how her hands shook as she opened a new spreadsheet. The office cruelty deepened one quiet morning when Jessica organised a casual Friday photo for the company newsletter. She made sure everyone dressed in trendy outfits, but didn't tell Emily. When the photographer arrived, Jessica called out, "Oh, Emily, you're here." "Well, stand in the back, I guess." The team snickered as Emily, in her usual plain slacks and shirt, shuffled to the rear. Tom muttered, "She's going to ruin the vibe." The photographer hesitated, but Jessica waved him on. Emily stood still, her hands clasped her face calm, but her fingers twisted together, the knuckles paling as the camera flashed. The photo went out company-wide, with Emily barely visible, a blurry figure in a sea of colour. Jessica's grin was wide as she forwarded the email. "Hey, before we go on, can you do something real quick? Grab your phone, hit that like button, leave a comment below and subscribe to the channel stories. Like Emily's matter, and your support keeps them alive. It's just a small moment, but it means everything to share this kind of truth." All right, let's get back to what happened. The office turned colder after Jessica's latest stunt. During a team meeting, she handed out printed spreadsheets for a client presentation, but Emily's copy was marked up with red ink. Fake errors circled with notes like basic math and try harder. Jessica played innocent, saying, "Oh, I must have grabbed the wrong draft." The room snickered, eyes darting to Emily. Tom leaned back, grinning. "Guess some people aren't cut out for this." Emily flipped through the pages, her face calm, but her fingers pressed hard against the paper, leaving faint creases. She didn't speak. She just set the spreadsheet aside and took notes on a blank pad, her pen moving steadily. Harrove glanced her way. His brow furrowed but said nothing. The laughter lingered sharp and heavy as the meeting dragged on. Emily wasn't just good at her job, she was exceptional. One week the company faced a crisis. A major client's account was a mess. Numbers not adding up, deadlines looming. The team was panicking. Jessica included, her usual confidence gone, as she shuffled through papers. Emily stayed late, poring over the ledgers, her desk lamp, the only light in the office. By morning she'd fixed it. Every error traced, every balance corrected. She emailed the report to Mr. Harrove at 5. When he came in, he called her to his office. "Emily," he said, his gruff voice warm, "you saved our bacon." "Good work." She nodded, said, "Thank you, sir," and walked back to her desk. Jessica's face was stone as she overheard Tom just snorted and went back to his phone. But that night, Hargrove left a handwritten note on Emily's desk. "Keep it up, you're vital here." She slipped it into her bag, her lips twitching into a faint smile. Then came an unexpected ally. The company's janitor, a wiry man named Carl who rarely spoke, noticed Emily working late. He knocked on her cubicle, holding a thermos. "Coffee," he said, his voice rough. "You look like you need it." Emily looked up, surprised, and took the cup. It was strong, just how she liked it. Carl lingered, wiping a nearby desk, and said, "They're hard on you, don't let them win." Emily's eyes met his, and she nodded, her fingers wrapping around the warm thermos. She sipped the coffee, her shoulders easing, and went back to her ledgers. Carl's small gesture stayed with her, a quiet anchor in the storm of the office's cruelty. The mocking didn't stop at whispers. One morning, Emily found a sticky note on her monitor. "Dressed like you belong here." It was written in red marker, the handwriting sloppy but bold. She peeled it off, folded it neatly, and dropped it in the trash. Jessica was watching from across the room, her lips curled in a smug grin. Tom leaned back in his chair, pretending to stretch, and said, "Someone's got to tell her right. This isn't a thrift store." A few others laughed, their voices bouncing off the glass walls of the office. Emily didn't look at them. She opened her laptop, her fingers steady, and started typing, but her jaw was tight, and the photo of her mother on her desk seemed to catch her eye for a moment longer than usual. The cruelty escalated one rainy afternoon when Emily's umbrella broke, leaving her soaked as she entered the office. Jessica spotted her and called out, "Wow, Emily, did you swim here? You're dripping all over the carpet." The room erupted in laughter, heads turning. Tom grabbed a roll of paper towels and tossed it at her feet. "Clean it up, would you? Some of us care about this place." Emily picked up the roll, her wet hair sticking to her face, and wiped the floor without a word. Her slacks clung to her legs, and her shoes squeaked with every step. She didn't look up, but her hands moved slowly, deliberately, as if measuring each motion. A coworker snapped a photo, whispering, "This is going viral." Emily straightened, set the towels on a nearby desk, and sat down, her soaked shirt leaving a damp mark on her chair. Then came a quiet shift. During a slow day, a junior intern, a shy kid named Daniel, approached Emily's desk. He was nervous, clutching a folder. "Miss Walker," he said, his voice low, "I saw how you fixed that client report. Could you teach me how you caught those errors?" Emily looked up, her eyes softening. She pulled a chair over and walked him through her process, her voice steady, her hands pointing out patterns on the screen. Daniel scribbled notes, his face lighting up. When he left, he mumbled, "You're really good at this." Jessica overheard her eyes narrowing, but Emily didn't notice. She just adjusted her mother's photo, her fingers lingering on the frame, and went back to work. Daniel's folder, left behind, had a small thank you written on the cover. The bullying took a darker turn during a company happy hour. Emily was pressured to attend. She stood alone by the bar, sipping water. her plain shirt out of place among cocktail dresses and suits. Jessica approached a glass of wine in hand and accidentally spilled it down Emily's front. "Oh no!" She gasped, her voice loud enough to draw eyes. "I'm so clumsy, but red wine's cheap, right, you'll manage." The crowd laughed, phones coming out to snap photos. Emily's shirt was ruined, the stains spreading like blood. She grabbed a napkin, dabbing at it, her face still. "It's fine," she said, her voice low. She walked to the bathroom, her steps steady, but her hands trembled as she scrubbed the fabric. The water turning pink. Jessica's laugh echoed outside, joined by Tom's loud chuckle. The rumour about her snitching grew legs. People glared at her openly now. Tom stopped by her desk one day, leaning in close. "You think you're smarter than us, huh?" he said, his breath smelling of coffee. "Reporting people to Hardrove. You're not fooling anyone." Emily looked up, her eyes calm. "I don't report anyone," she said, her voice even. "I just do my job." Tom blinked, thrown off by her steadiness, then walked away, muttering Jessica overheard, and smirked, already planning her next move. She didn't know Emily was starting to notice something else. Numbers in the company's ledgers that didn't add up. Small at first, then bigger. Transfers to accounts she didn't recognise. She started saving screenshots, her hands quick on the keyboard, her heart beating a little faster. One afternoon, the office's malice turned public. Jessica posted a group photo on the company's internal chat, captioned Team Spirit, minus the one who doesn't get it. Emily was cropped out, but everyone knew who was meant comments. Piled up, good call. And she's such a drag. Tom added a laughing emoji. Emily saw it on her screen, the notification popping up during a quiet moment. She clicked it off her face unchanged, but her hand paused on her mouse, her fingers curling slightly. She opened a new spreadsheet, her typing steady, but the photo of her mother seemed to anchor her gaze. Later, she found a printed copy of the post slipped under her keyboard, the caption circled in red. She tore it in half, her movement slow, and dropped it in the shredder. Emily's nights got longer. She'd sit at her desk after everyone left the office dark, except for her monitor's glow. She traced the strange transactions, cross-referencing dates, amounts, names. It wasn't just a mistake, it was deliberate. Someone was funneling money, and they were good at hiding it. Emily didn't tell anyone, not yet. She copied the evidence to a USB drive and emailed a backup to a college friend who worked in law. She kept the drive in her bag, tucked inside a zipped pocket. At home, she'd check on her mother, make dinner, and then sit at the kitchen table. Her laptop open her eyes, scanning numbers. Her mother's soft breathing from the next room kept her grounded, but the weight of what she'd found pressed hard on her chest. A flicker of recognition came from an unlikely source. During a routine audit, a client representative, Ms. Patel, visited the office. She noticed Emily's meticulous work on a complex account and paused by her desk. "You caught something we missed," she said, her voice clear, carrying across the room. "Our team's been struggling with this for months." She handed Emily her card, saying, "If you ever want to change, call me." Jessica's head snapped up, her smile tight. Tom shifted in his seat, his eyes narrowing. Emily took the card, her fingers steady, and said, "Thank you, Ms. Patel." She tucked it into her bag, her face calm, but her eyes lingered on the card for a moment before she returned to her work. The office buzzed, but quieter now, with a hint of unease. One morning, Emily arrived to find her desk rearranged pens, scattered papers, shuffled her mother's photo face down. A note taped to her chair read, "Nobody likes a sneak." Jessica stood nearby, chatting with Tom, her eyes flicking to Emily with a satisfied glint. The office watched, waiting for a reaction. Emily set the photo upright, her fingers gentle, and started organising her desk. She didn't speak, but her movements were precise, almost defiant. As she worked, a senior accountant, Mrs. Ellis, passed by and paused. "Emily," she said, loud enough for others to hear, "your audit on the Q3 report was flawless. I've recommended you for the compliance team." Jessica's smile froze. Emily nodded, saying, "Thank you." Her voice steady and kept sorting papers, her hands unshaken. The office cruelty hit a new low. One afternoon, Jessica organised a team-building lunch, inviting everyone except Emily. They left the office laughing, their voices echoing down the hall. When they returned, Jessica dropped a takeout container on Emily's desk. "Leftovers," she said, her voice dripping with fake kindness. "Figured you'd want something." The container was half empty, the food cold and picked over. Tom laughed loud and mean. "Yeah, don't say we never gave you anything." Emily didn't touch the container. She slid it to the edge of her desk. Her movements slow and went back to her work, but her fingers paused on the keyboard and she stared at her mother's photo. Her lips pressed tight. Then came the day everything broke. Emily was about to send her evidence to the internal auditors. She'd typed the email attached to the files, her finger hovering over the send button. But before she could click, the office doors burst open. FBI agents stormed in, their voices sharp, their badges gleaming. "Emily Walker," one shouted. She stood up, her chair scraping the floor. The agents surrounded her desk, pulling her arms behind her back. The cuffs were cold, biting into her wrists. Jessica gasped her hand over her mouth, but her eyes gleamed with satisfaction. Tom leaned back, arms across, and said, "Well, damn." Little spreadsheet mouse finally slipped. The office watched as Emily was led out, her head high, her face blank. Nobody saw the USB drive still tucked in her bag, hidden but safe. The news hit fast. Tabloids ran her photo. Emily in cuffs, her plain shirt wrinkled, her ponytail loose. Headlines screamed, "Accountant masterminds, corporate fraud." Her mother's neighbours stopped visiting. Her college friends stopped answering calls. Emily's world shrank to a cell. Her life reduced to a jumpsuit and a number. In prison, the inmates were merciless. A tall woman with a scar on her cheek shoved Emily against a wall on her first day. "What's a soft thing like you doing here?" she sneered. "Going to cry for mommy." Emily didn't answer. She straightened up, her eyes steady, and walked away. But the taunts followed her through meals, through work, through the long nights in her bunk. Prison was a different kind of cruel. The guards ignored her pleas of innocence. Their faces hard. She was assigned to kitchen duty, scrubbing pots until her hands bled. One guard, a stocky man with a buzz cut, tossed her a rag and said, "Keep moving, princess, this ain't your office." Inmates tripped her in the halls, stole her food, laughed when she fell. A group of veteran prisoners cornered her in the laundry room, their voices low and mean. "Think you're better than us?" One set her breath hot on Emily's face. "You'll break by week 1. Emily didn't flinch. She met the woman's eyes and said, "I'm already broken." "What else you got?" The woman blinked, then stepped back, thrown off by the quiet steel in Emily's voice. The abuse in prison grew vicious. During a yard session, an inmate named Tanya, stocky and loud, snatched Emily's only pair of glasses and crushed them under her boot. "Don't need these to scrub floors, right?" she said, her voice booming. The other inmates cheered, kicking the broken frames across the dirt. Emily knelt to pick up the pieces. Her hands steady, but her vision blurred. She didn't speak, didn't cry. She just gathered the shards and tucked them in her pocket, her fingers brushing the jagged edges. A guard watched, smirking, and said, "Keep the yard clean, Walker." Emily stood, her eyes unfocused, but her posture straight, and walked back to her task. The world now a haze around her. The prison's cruelty took a sinister turn. One freezing morning, an inmate named Vicky, with a shaved head and a cruel grin, slipped a dead rat into Emily's bunk, tucking it under her thin blanket. When Emily pulled back the cover, the stench hit her, and Vicky's laughter rang out from across the dorm. "Welcome to your new friend, Princess!" she shouted, as other inmates joined in their jeers echoing off the concrete walls. Emily's face didn't change. She grabbed a rag, wrapped the rat, and carried it to the trash. Her steps measured. Her hands shook as she scrubbed them clean, the cold water stinging her raw skin. A guard passed by chuckling and said, "Better get used to it." Emily dried her hands. Her eyes fixed on the sink and returned to her bunk, her blanket now folded with precision. Emily didn't give up. She watched everything. The guard's shift changes the gate timings, the blind spots in the cameras. She noticed patterns just like she had with the ledgers. At night, she'd lie in her bunk, her mind mapping the prison's layout. She met Lena, a young tech whiz locked up for a hack she didn't commit. Lena was small jittery, but sharp. Emily helped her with math for a GED program, and they started talking. Then there was Martia, an older woman who'd worked maintenance before her sentence. Marta knew the prison's plumbing, the vents, the weak spots. Emily listened to her accountant's brain piecing it together. She didn't push, didn't rush. She just built trust. One quiet conversation at a time. A small act of kindness broke through the darkness. One evening, Lena slipped a folded piece of paper under Emily's pillow. It was a sketch of Emily's mother, drawn from a description Emily had shared during their late-night talks. The lines were simple, but the smile was exact, warm, familiar. Lena whispered, "Thought you'd want this." Emily unfolded it, her fingers tracing the pencil marks. She didn't speak, but her eyes softened and she tucked the sketch inside her jumpsuit close to her chest. The next day, she shared her meal with Lena, her hands steady as she passed the bread. Marta noticed her weathered face softening and nodded. The bond between them grew silent but strong. The bullying didn't let up. One day, an inmate named Carla, broad-shouldered and loud, dumped a tray of food on Emily's lap during lunch. "Oops," Carla said, grinding as the room laughed. "Guess you're used to scraps." The other inmates hooted, banging their trays. Emily stood up, her jumpsuit stained, and wiped her hands on a napkin. She didn't say a word. She just walked to the sink, her steps steady, and washed the stain as best she could. But her hands shook, and for a moment she gripped the sink's edge, her knuckles white. Lena saw it and slipped her a clean rag. Later, her eyes saying what words didn't. Emily nodded, tucking the rag in her pocket, her face calm again. The prison's cruelty peaked during a work detail. Emily was assigned to clean a storage room, a cramped space with no ventilation. An inmate named Rhonda Wiry and mean locked the door behind her, laughing through the small window. "Let's see how Miss Office does in the dark," she called. The air grew thick, the walls closing in. Emily banged on the door, her fists steady but her breaths short. Hours passed before a guard opened it, his face bored. "Quit whining," he said. Emily stumbled out her shirt soaked with sweat, her face pale. She didn't speak, but her eyes burned as she walked past Rhonda, who smirked and high-fived another inmate. Emily's hands clenched, but she kept moving, her steps deliberate. A spark of defiance emerged during a rare prison library session. Emily still squinting without her. Glasses was sorting books when a guard tossed her a torn ledger from the prison's budget. "Fix this," he barked, expecting her to falter. Instead, Emily sat down, her fingers tracing the numbers by feel, and corrected the errors in an hour. The guard, stunned, took the ledger and muttered, "Not bad." Word spread among the inmates, and Martia overheard her eyes gleaming with pride. Emily didn't react, but she kept the pencil she'd used, tucking it behind her ear. A small act of reclaiming her strengths, Lena noticed and grinned, whispering, "You're unstoppable." The moment was small, but it shifted something in their trio's resolve. The bullying grew even more personal one night in the dorm. An inmate named Dee, with a tattooed neck and a sharp tongue, stole Emily's only letter from her mother, a fragile page she'd kept hidden. Dee read it aloud to the room, mocking Emily's mother's shaky handwriting. "Look at this. I miss you, Emmy. How sweet." The inmates laughed, some clapping. Emily stood her face still and walked to Dee. "Give it back," she said, her voice low but firm. Dee smirked, holding the letter high. Emily didn't flinch. She stepped closer. Her eyes locked on Dee's and said, "Now." Dee faltered, tossed the letter and turned away. Emily caught it. Her fingers gentle and tucked it away. Her breathing steady but her hands trembling slightly. Emily's plan took shape. She, Lena and Martia met in whispers. Late at night, when the guards were distracted, Emily drew the escape route on a scrap of paper, her pencil quick and precise. She'd noticed the prison system rebooted every month, leaving a 30-minute window when cameras lagged. There was a sewage tunnel, rarely checked accessible through a utility shaft. Marta knew how to loosen the vent. Lena could handle the dryer cords for climbing. Emily calculated the timing down to the second. They waited for a stormy night, the thunder masking their noise. When the moment came, they moved. Emily went first, her hands steady as she pried open the vent. They crawled through the shaft. The air thick and sour, and dropped into the tunnel. 30 minutes later, they were out, the rain washing the grime from their faces. Their escape wasn't just a breakout, it was a statement. As they emerged, Marta handed Emily a small tool she'd kept hidden, a wrench etched with the prison's logo. "For luck," she said, her voice gruff. Emily took it, her fingers closing around the cold metal, and nodded. They split up, but not before Emily pressed the sketch of her mother into Lena's hand. "Keep it safe," she said, her voice low. Lena's eyes widened, but she tucked it away. The wrench stayed with Emily, a reminder of what she'd survived. Days later, a guard found the open vent, and the prison security chief was demoted. Whispers spread among the inmates. Emily's name became a quiet legend, a spark in the dark. On the outside, Emily didn't stop. She'd emailed the USB backup to her college friend before her arrest, and now she tracked him down. He was hesitant, scared, but he handed over the drive. Emily found a young journalist, Sarah, who worked for a small but scrappy outlet. Sarah listened, her eyes wide, as Emily laid out the evidence dates, transfers, names. They worked late into the night, cross-referencing files, building a story no one could ignore. Sarah's article hit the internet, then TV, then every major network, the real fraudsters. Jessica, Tom, and a VP named Mark were named. The evidence was airtight. Emily's face was everywhere again, but this time the headlines called her a hero. A final twist sealed the truth's impact. During the investigation, Sarah uncovered a hidden email from Mark to Jessica, sent months before Emily's arrest. It detailed their plan to frame her, complete with a mocking line. "The mouse won't see it coming." Sarah leaked it to the press, and it exploded online, shared thousands of times. The public's outrage was deafening, with protests outside the company's headquarters demanding justice. Emily didn't join them. She was at her mother's side, reading her a letter from a supporter who'd seen the news. Her voice was steady, but her fingers brushed the wrench in her pocket, a quiet reminder of her strength. The email became the final nail in her enemy's coffin, their guilt undeniable. The courts moved fast. Emily's lawyer, a sharp woman named Rachel, filed an appeal. The case was reopened. The evidence undeniable. Jessica broke down in court, admitting she'd planted the fake documents. Tom tried to flee, but was caught at the airport. Mark, the VP, took a plea deal, spilling everything. They were convicted. Jessica got 7 years, Tom 5, Mark 10. Emily sat in the courtroom, her hands folded, her face calm. When the judge declared her exonerated, she didn't smile. She just nodded, her eyes on the floor, and walked out. The FBI issued a public apology, their faces red on national TV. Emily didn't watch. She was already at her mother's bedside holding her hand, her voice soft as she promised things would be okay. The truth rippled further than anyone expected. A week after the trial, Sarah the journalist received an anonymous package, a detailed ledger from an insider at another firm inspired by Emily's story. It exposed a similar fraud, and Sarah's next article credited Emily's courage for sparking the whistleblower's move. The story went viral, trending with hashtags like Emily Walker. Truth, Emily didn't see it. She was too busy settling her mother into a new care facility paid for by the settlement. But when Sarah called to tell her, Emily paused her hand on her mother's photo and said, "Good, let it keep going." Her voice was quiet, but it carried a weight that made Sarah smile. The fallout was quiet but real. Jessica's social media, once full of glamour shots, was deleted after thousands of comments called her out. Tom lost his job and his fancy condo. His name, toxic in the industry. Mark's family cut him off. His reputation in ruins. Emily didn't follow the news. She got a settlement enough to pay her mother's bills and more. A bigger firm offered her a senior auditing role. She took it, but only after they agreed to let her mentor young women in the field. She stood in a conference room on her first day, her plain shirt unchanged, and spoke to a group of nervous interns. "You don't need to be loud," she said. "You just need to be right." They listened, their eyes wide. Her voice steady. Emily's story spread. People shared it on buses and break rooms over dinner. They talked about the woman who'd been mocked, framed and locked away, who'd clawed her way out and brought the truth to light. They talked about the ones who'd hurt her, who'd learned what happens when you underestimate someone. And they talked about Emily, who didn't need to shout or fight or prove herself. She just did what was right, and that was enough. For everyone who'd ever been pushed down, who'd ever been told they were nothing, her story felt like a hand reaching out saying, "You're not alone." She'd been through hell, mocked, betrayed, caged. But she came back, not with anger, but with truth. And that truth changed everything. You know that feeling, don't you? When the world tries to break you, but you keep going, Emily's story is for you. Where are you watching from? Leave a comment below and hit follow to walk with me through heartbreak, betrayal, and finally healing.